cuffs are off, man. Get right. Too many left in these leagues, but I ain't gonna leave. I'ma get right. Get right. Down to the bottom and scratch it for all the.
Hey everybody, Adam Rank here.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus Grant.
This is AJ Dillon of the Green Bay Packers.
I got to give a shout out to y'all at Get Right Fantasy.
If you are not subscribed, what are you waiting for? You want to lose your league?
Check out the Get Right Fantasy Network.
You got to get right with the Get Right Fantasy Network.
And best of luck with your podcast. Appreciate the support.
You're tuned in to watch my boys at Get Right Fantasy Network. Get you right. Enjoy the show.
But I tune in every Friday. Strategies provided, I will lock in every way. So go and roll your sleeves up. Yeah, go and roll your sleeves up. And I'm getting down, cause I roll my sleeves up. And I'm getting right, cause I roll my sleeves up.
Yo, what's up, football fans? Welcome to another episode of The Extra Point. I am your host, Phil Ruskin. Man, I got to get something off my chest. I went to the Niners game last Sunday. I played the Chiefs, and I'll be honest, I have never in my life been more frustrated in attendance at a football game than I was on Sunday. We had great seats. Weather was perfect. It was a great day. Pre-game, the tailgate, like it was awesome, man. And watching Debo walk about 20 feet underneath where I was sitting into the tunnel was super disappointing. Just the whole game, it just sucked. You know, like you go up. I didn't know if we would win the game. Obviously, the Chiefs are the best. They're the worst undefeated team in the league. And I don't know. I just frustrated. You know, I just feel like I had to get that off my chest real quick. That it was a sad day for the Niners. It wasn't a good game, and watching Brock Purdy throw 3 picks was just a bummer. So, without further ado, let's talk about some good stuff in the Dynasty world. And I'm going to jump right in. I've had some stuff on my mind lately about, win now teams and like, what are we doing? Who are we trading for? And so I just want to talk through some stuff that I've been thinking through. And obviously, I got some stats and I got some numbers for y'all, but let's start at the top with the man of the hour and Mr. DeAndre Hopkins. And like going to the Chiefs, all right, cool. I get it. But what value does he really have, right? Like this is a player that 3 years ago, he has finished as wide receiver 45, 47, and 22. And he's currently the wide receiver 74. And look, I get it. The Titans suck. Like the Titans are the dead last in pass volume, and they're just awful, right? Will Levis is making memes instead of making first down throws. But this is a player that's still 32 years old, right? And so the Chiefs, like, they don't have anyone. I understand. Like Rashee Rice is now out for the season. Juju went out last week, early in the game against the Niners. Like they're just decimated. They just don't have anyone to catch the ball. But like Patrick Mahomes has more interceptions than touchdowns right now. The team's overall passing volume, they rank 22nd in the league out of 32 in terms of total pass attempts. And they rank 22nd out of 32 in terms of total passing yards. So I understand the trade because he's cheap. It's a 5th round pick. That's a conditional 4th round pick. But they have to make the Super Bowl, which could happen. And he has to play more than 60% of the snaps. So that's fine from like a low investment perspective. But the question I asked at the top was, what value does DeAndre Hopkins really have left in Dynasty? And I still think the answer is basically none. Like this was a guy 2 seasons ago that was supposed to be a game changer for the Titans. I know they've changed quarterbacks. I know they've changed coaches, offensive coordinator scheme, the whole thing. But I just don't see how he's turning your season around. He's not someone I'm targeting. He's not someone I'm trading for. I think at the end of the day, if you're saying to me the Chiefs don't have anyone to catch the ball, which is why they went out and traded for DeAndre Hopkins, fine. But if I'm a defensive coordinator, why am I not just trying to eliminate him and take him away every single game? So I don't know that he's going to create as much separation as he used to. He's a contested ball catcher, and that's fine. But yes, this will be the best quarterback he's ever played with. We're not going to dispute that part of it. I'm just for the people that are, trading for DeAndre Hopkins, for the people in redraft that are, he's not on the waiver wire, but, that are considering, oh, I've had him forever and I haven't played him, but I haven't dropped him. This is going to turn my season around. Whenever I take a negative player stance, I always want to be wrong because I want all the players to succeed. I know they're on someone's roster, and I want all of you all to win your leagues, except when you play me. But my point being is I'm struggling from an analytical standpoint and a data standpoint to really see how Hopkins is going to get there. I just don't see a path for this to quote unquote change or turn your season around. So please don't trade for a 32-year-old player in Dynasty, but in redraft, I think you just have to have pretty low expectations. Is he going to get more volume? Sure. Is he going to catch a couple of touchdowns? Probably. But I just don't see him going from wide receiver 74 to all of a sudden finishing as a wide receiver 3 over the back half of the season. Let's talk about another wide receiver who is also older and is, very excited that his quarterback is coming back this week. And of course, the big question is, will he? So Tyreek Hill, is Tua really coming back? I don't know. I mean, I know everything I read, everything I've looked at says that he's going to play this week, and that seems to be the narrative. But is he the long-term answer? And that's the question we have to ask in Dynasty, because I think if you had traded Tyreek Hill last season after coming off of overall wide receiver 2 performance, you were probably upset. And then all of a sudden after week 1, Tua goes out. And at the end of the day, you think to yourself, can he do this? Well, Mike Evans is quarterback proof. Certainly Tyreek Hill's quarterback proof, right? He isn't. All of the Dolphins have been downgraded. Achane's been poor. Waddle's been poor. Hill's been non-existent. And so I question whether it's better to get out a year early than it is right now. And so I'm facing this because I have Tyreek Hill on several Dynasty rosters where I am a contender and my brain says keep him. If Tua comes back and he can sustain the rest of this season, then I can hopefully get something out of Tyreek if I decide to trade him this year. But when it comes to Tua, look, he's got 3 diagnosed concussions that we know about. And he had a 4th quote unquote head injury that they didn't actually call a concussion, but basically the NFL changed a rule after that when he left the game and came back it was either last year or 2 years ago against Buffalo. And let's not forget that he dislocated his hip at Alabama. So teams questioned his health even coming out of Alabama in the pre-draft process. So I wonder about Tyreek and if he's tied to Tua, and if Tua's healthy, then it's okay. And we know what he's capable of doing. But my question about Tyreek is if Tua doesn't come back, or if Tua comes back and gets injured, big shocker that would be. What if they go trade for Joe Flacco? What if they go trade for Andy Dalton? Not this week, obviously. I'm talking about for later this season or even for next year, because I don't know where they're going to be in the draft, and I don't know if they're going to go and grab another quarterback. They just paid Tua $165 guaranteed million of that $215 million contract. So can Tyreek bounce back under a different quarterback via trade? That's what I'm looking for over the next couple of weeks. My biggest questions are going to be, number one, what does Tua look like? He's saying, or at least I've heard and read, he's not going to wear a Guardian cap. Dude, I don't care how cool or not cool you look. I don't care what your social media posts are going to look like. Protect your freaking health, man. Take care of your family. Who wants to be eating out of a straw at 30 years old? And that's seemingly, sadly, where this guy seems to be headed if he gets another injury. So for the health and safety, please wear a Guardian cap. Please be smart. But I'm at that point right now where I'm starting to struggle with what Tyreek Hill's true value is, because when he's tied to Tua, I think you can still trade and get a second, possibly even a first if he goes back to being Tyreek and goes off. But without Tua, I don't know that you can even trade for him. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's something I've been thinking about, and I think it's kind of been on my mind lately, obviously, because I have Tyreek, but I think it's also been on my mind because we talk about trade for and trade away candidates on this show pretty much every week. And these older players that can get you over the top to win you a championship, that's kind of the subject of my top A segment tonight. And that's really what I've been thinking about as I start to get into some of these later, we're about halfway through the fantasy season, right? Week 15, week 16, depending on your league, is really when we're starting to see playoffs. So let's talk about 2 more guys, and then we'll get into some trade for and trade away candidates. Stephon Diggs is interesting, right? He's a player that you just, you didn't know how he was going to fit in Houston with the excitement around Nico. Certainly, of course, with the excitement around Tank. Then Tank misses some time to start the season, not fully healthy. Now Nico's on IR. And really the guy that's been killing it is Joe Mixon. We're going to get to him next. But in full PPR, Stephon Diggs is the wide receiver 6 on the season. He's only had 2 games this year where he's failed to score double-digit points. That was week 2 against Chicago and then last week against Green Bay. Now, they ran the ball 5 million times last week, and so he only had 7 targets, 5 catches, turned that into 23 yards. He scored 3 touchdowns on the season. And so I thought to myself, okay, with Nico going out, what can I get Diggs for? Is he a guy that's really going to help me for this next month? Because this is a really important month in every format. In Dynasty, it's important. Obviously, in Redraft, it's important because you get through that first 4 weeks. There's no bye weeks. Everyone's available unless they're injured. And now you're starting to get into the kind of this, middle third of your season where you have guys that are going out on bye weeks. The injuries are starting to pile up. And so you're saying to yourself, okay, I'm still either in the mix and I'm, 1 game away from really pushing myself into the playoffs again, or I'm a loss away from maybe, having to rethink what my strategy is. Does it make sense to trade for an older guy? So I offered out last week Jacoby Myers with the Devontae Adams trade. I know Myers was injured, but from a dynasty perspective, Myers and a 2025 second, which in my opinion is pretty close, maybe a slight overpay. And the guy says to me, no, I want a first-round pick for Stephon Diggs. I just struggle with putting a first-round pick out there for a 30-year-old player when I'm not guaranteed a playoff spot yet. It's just too early in the season, and that's 2 bad losses, makes that an early to, mid first-round pick. So that one I struggled with. I came back and countered with something better than Myers. I don't remember what I came back with, to be honest. I should have put it in the notes and I didn't, but it was a better receiver and still the second. And he was like, no, man, I'm not selling Diggs for anything less than a first. And then he tried to sell me on why Diggs is worth a first, et cetera, et cetera. And I get it, but Nico should be back in a couple of weeks. Joe Mixon's killing it right now. Tank put up a 0 last week. I mean, it was absolutely atrocious. They didn't throw the ball. They had a really low pass volume. Like I said, they ran it a million times, and they lost the game, 21-19. So I think my caution to everyone is be careful when you're trading for these older guys in Dynasty, because yes, they could get you through the season, but just get these older players at the right price. Don't get them at a cost that you're not comfortable with. Don't overpay for a player that's not going to be on your roster in next season and specifically in 2 years. Steph Diggs may not be a Texan next year. He is on a 1-year contract. They voided the rest of his contract. It is possible they re-sign him, but you don't know where he's going to be. And he's not exactly a guy that's proven to be, a locker room guy. So I get it. They beat the Bills. He was super stoked. I'd be stoked too, but just do it at the right price. So let's talk about Joe Mixon because he's a guy that's killing it right now. And I think you have to take a look at Joe Mixon for what he is in Dynasty, not in Redraft. He's 28 years old and he's on a contract. So that's good. Mixon's going to be around for the next couple years. And if you've listened to the show, if you watch the show, you know that I always talk about I play Dynasty in a 2 to 3 year window. So I do think Joe Mixon, regardless of format, is still a very solid, even in Dynasty, trade for candidate. He's obviously a fantastic trade for candidate in your redraft leagues. So I offered Rachaad White and a 2025 mid-second. I knew the deal wouldn't get done. I knew I'd need to come back, but that was my starting offer. Negotiation 101. Never start with your best offer. But it wasn't like I lowballed the guy. I didn't give him, Rachaad White in a 3rd or a 4th round pick or some other poor running back. Rachaad White killed it last week. So we're going to talk about him later. The response I got back was, dude, that's not even close. I have an offer for a first, 2 seconds, and 2/3 for Joe Mixon. And I thought to myself, great, go take that offer. I would take that. And to me, that's a redraft mentality, right? He is RB17 on the season. He has missed 3 games. And the guy tried to sell me on, you need to beat this offer. This is the best. This is like the minimum I'll accept. He should be the RB1. All right, great. Then go accept that offer. I'm not going to pay that kind of a price. I'm not going to pay five picks, a first, 2 seconds, and 2/3 for Joe Mixon. That's out of my comfort zone. Today, about an hour ago, as I'm going through and kind of finalizing the show doc here, looking up some additional stats, some additional numbers I want to add in, I see a trade go down in a Dynasty league where Chuba Hubbard and a 2025 second nets the other guy, Joe Mixon. So again, everything is going to be part and parcel to what your league is and how you guys value picks and what players are actually worth. If you listened to the show last week, you heard Kendall say I would offer 3 first-round picks for Malik Neighbors. I put Malik Neighbors up in a league today for trade. I'll be honest with you, he's not really on the trade block. What he is on the trade block for is to see if Kendall really wants to pay that price and start a negotiation. Now, I could have sent Kendall a trade and I could have sent him a text and just said, hey, buddy, do you want to work something out? But maybe people listen to the show. Maybe people that listen to the show are in the league and they're going to just go ahead and say, you know what? I'm willing to pay that price. I will give you 3 firsts from Malik Neighbors. So to me, it's a question, like I said, of what guys value in the league and how you guys see players. But I do think it's interesting when you see older players and you're getting offers first and 2 seconds and 2/3. First of all, I don't know if the guy really had that, right? Maybe he was just bullshitting and he was like, oh, yeah, this is what I'm paying, just to see if he could, I play a lot of poker, just to see if he could bluff me into giving him something better. But I think at the end of the day, you just have to kind of feel your league out. You have to understand what picks and players are worth to certain guys. Every league is different. But I do think universally, my advice is always going to be the same with older guys, especially guys that are more than likely on their last contract. Even if you are trying to win, do not mortgage the house. It is not worth it. You know as well as I do that anything funky can happen. You can make the championship game. I'm one of the 42,000 people that was impacted a couple years ago by the Najee Harris 42-yard touchdown run when it should have been a kneel down in Ben Roethlisberger's last game. So I think for me, again, just be mindful of some of these guys and what you're actually paying when it comes to some of these older players, because yes, they can push you over the top and win a championship. And yes, championships do last forever. I've got a couple championship rings sitting behind me on my little trophy case here. And that's awesome. It reminds me that I had some great seasons, but I don't want to mortgage my entire dynasty roster at the chance to get a championship at the wrong cost. So DeAndre Hopkins, Tyreek Hill, Steph Diggs, Joe Mixon, if those are guys that you're interested in trading for, do it at the right price. Want to jump in the chat here and just say hello to a couple of the folks before we jump into some of the trade away and trade for targets. So Born Tua, Be Wild, thinks Tua is coming back this week. He's got an avatar with Tua, so love it. Hope you are right. Hope he's healthy. Please wear a Guardian cap. And of course, our boy, Anthony, a.k.a. Rasta, saying, what up? What's up, my guy? Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Missed you last week, man. Being obviously on the road, but excited to be back with you tomorrow night. On Friday night. I thought today was Thursday. I'll be back tomorrow for my DFS higher or lower underdog segment and betting pod. But on Friday, I'll be back with Rasta doing our sits starts of the week. So Rasta asking if Malik Neighbors was really on the block or was it a market check? It was a little bit of both. Kendall obviously thinking that he believes Neighbors is worth 3 firsts. Kendall happens to have 4 firsts in that league, and I happen to have Malik Neighbors. So one of us might have to put our money where our mouth is, and either I have to man up and pony up to sell Neighbors, or Kendall has to pay for him. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But Rasta had a question. He said, what do you think of my trade in that same league? So this is a league I run called the Super Bowl. 10-team, full PPR, single quarterback. Yes. 10-team, full PPR, 3 wide receiver, 3 flex, single quarterback. And Rasta is saying, what do you think of my trade? So for those that don't know, we saw BTJ traded today straight up for Puka Nacua. Rasta got Brian Thomas Jr., sending Puka Nacua away. One, I love the trade because I'm playing the new manager who acquired Puka, and Puka's questionable for tomorrow night, so I don't have to play against BTJ. It makes me feel good unless Puka comes out and kill it. No. I think it's a great trade for 2 reasons. Number one, I don't know what Puka's health is like for this season. So from just a rest of season perspective, yes, he's supposed to be coming back. He's supposed to play tomorrow night. We'll see what it looks like. Additionally, now you've got Cooper Kupp being talked about as being traded. I don't know if that's a real thing. Obviously, the Rams are looking, at least what I read and hear, is that they're looking to get a second rounder as part of a trade package for him. The question that I have about Puka is the same question that I had about Kupp, and it's the same question I've had about any of the Rams players other than Kyron Williams, which is, what if Stafford calls it a career next year? And so I think you've heard it on tons and tons of Dynasty shows. You've heard it on all kinds of redraft shows. You've read about it in articles. Everybody that saw what Puka did last year had roughly the same type of a question. Is this an outlier season? And if it's not, is this the best statistical season he might ever have? And so I don't know if it's an outlier season. I do think Puka's talented, and I certainly think he's a good player. So I think he's very capable of putting up wide receiver one numbers in the future, just on a talent perspective. But who's throwing him the ball? And does their system change if McVay eventually leaves? Maybe, they offer him maybe Tom Brady really does leave the booth and then, goes to do this, ownership with the Raiders. And Fox News goes, and because it's not surprising, they've asked McVay to go and do television. He decided to come back and coach again. So there are other ways than just getting fired, which I don't think will happen for McVay, that he could just leave football. So on the other side of that, Rasta, to your question specifically, you have to ask yourself what you believe about Trevor Lawrence. I just traded for Brian Thomas Jr. in a redraft league this year. I feel great about it for the rest of the season because BTJ is killing it. In Dynasty, what do you believe about Trevor Lawrence? Because he is going to be the quarterback. Etienne's banged up. Tank Bigsby looks good and looks like he's going to be the guy. So when Etienne comes back, is it really truly the timeshare that Etienne managers feared and that Bigsby managers were at least hoping for because he was basically useless last season? I think the long-term outlook is that who the quarterback's going to be in Jacksonville. And if they're bad, they're going to throw it. And if they're good, they're still going to throw it. Brian Thomas Jr. is the guy. Christian Kirk, I believe this is the last year of his contract. Evan Ingram's got one more year, but he's over 30, years old. So to me, I like the BTJ side of the trade more than I like the Puka side of the trade. You have guaranteed, I won't say production, but you have guaranteed minus injury, a floor that Trevor Lawrence can provide. So I like it. I think it's a good trade. And I think if you're looking to acquire a player like Brian Thomas Jr., you have to pay for him. I offered Chris Olave in a second last week, straight up for BTJ, and that didn't even apparently get close. The guy didn't even counter. He texted me, saw the trade. He's a good friend, so we talk all the time. And he was like, yeah, I can't do it for, I don't remember what he said, but I can't do it for that price, basically. So Puka straight up, I think, is a great price. And I think it's an awesome trade, and a trade that I think both sides are happy with. Both sides think is fair, but I do think BTJ has the longer runway and I think has the higher ceiling, even with Trevor, because you just don't know what that quarterback's going to look like after next year for the Rams. Chandler Constantino, what's up, my man? Appreciate you being here. I don't recognize the name, so if you're not liked and subscribed, do me a favor and jump on, and the link is in the description here. Just go ahead and jump on and hit that like and subscribe button for us, brother. I appreciate you, man. If you're already subscribed, appreciate you doing that as well. But his question is trade Henry for Hunt and Jefferson full PPR. My assumption is that this is a redraft question because you're not trading Henry for Kareem Hunt and Justin Jefferson in Dynasty. So Chandler, if you're still here, man, just verify that I am correct, that this is a redraft question. That's a really tough redraft question. Derrick Henry's the RB1 right now. It's hard to get rid of him. He's basically scored a touchdown in every time he touches the ball. In fact, if you go onto the betting lines right now, you can no longer get Derrick Henry anytime touchdown at 0.5. It's now Derrick Henry anytime touchdown at 1.5. So that should tell you how good he has been. On the flip side, we are going to talk about, spoiler alert, we are going to talk about Kareem Hunt today. I would do this trade, and there's a reason I would do this trade. It's a 2-for-1. And so if you listen to the show, if you listen to any of our other shows, if you listen to the main show, you know that we always talk about when it's a 2-for-1 like this, you have to include whoever you're getting off the waiver wire as part of that trade. So you're getting Hunter Henry plus, waiver wire player A for Kareem Hunt and Justin Jefferson. there's no indication that Isaiah Pacheco will be back during the fantasy season unless it's late in the fantasy playoffs. He will probably return for the real NFL playoffs. We don't care about that. We do from an entertainment perspective and a fan perspective, but from a fantasy perspective, we're obviously done after week 17. Please don't ever play a championship game in week 18. That's atrocious. But to get a 2-for-1 here, you're never going to get a player like Justin Jefferson off the waiver wire. And honestly, you're not going to get a Kareem Hunt off the waiver wire unless you got Kareem Hunt. So to have Jefferson, who's still the guy, Sam Darnold's stock is on the decline. It's not low, but it is on the decline compared to how hot he started the season. He's certainly capable of picking it back up. But in full PPR, Derrick Henry's obviously not a pass catcher. Justice Hill, that's his role. And then, of course, Flowers, Andrews, Bateman, apparently last week. So I would do this trade in a vacuum because of that waiver wire piece. It's hard to give that up, but look, I was at the game last week when Hunt rushed for 2 touchdowns. He's been involved. He looked good. He had. We're going to get into some of his stats here in a second. So Chandler Constantino, if you are still around, hang out because we're going to talk about some trade for and trade away candidates. And Kareem Hunt's got some numbers I'm going to bring up here in a little bit. Let's do that. Let's talk about some trade for and trade away candidates. Look, I said last week on the show that the trade away candidate I believed was the number one guy you should get rid of in Dynasty was Chris Godwin. He was the wide receiver 1. He's an older player. He's out of contract next season. Baker's getting older. He's out of contract after next season, or excuse me, in 2 seasons. So it's kind of the end of the runway in Tampa. I hope you traded him away last week because now you can't. I just got an offer where a guy offered me Chris Godwin plus Calvin Ridley for Tyreek Hill. Not even close. It's a player that I can't use and I may not be able to use again in Chris Godwin. I don't know that he's going to come back week 1 next season. It depends on the severity of this injury and the surgery. And Tampa may not re-sign him. They don't have to. So I hope you traded him away. This obviously is not about Chris Godwin, but that was someone we said trade away next week. So you just don't know what can happen. You've got to maximize your window when you can get it. I do want to talk about Kareem Hunt. He's my number 1 trade away candidate in Dynasty. If you are not a contender, here's why. 3 weeks ago was his first week. He had 14 rushing attempts. He was kind of getting, used to football shape and obviously picking things up. 2 weeks ago, 27 attempts. Turns that into 102-1. Last week, scores 2 touchdowns right in front of my face. 28 attempts for 78 yards and the 2 touchdowns. So, look, he's 29 years old. He's been irrelevant the last 3 years, and he was an RB4 in each of those seasons, meaning he finished outside of the top 36 running backs. So, the last time he was truly impactful was 2020. He was the RB10. I could not preview for tomorrow Kareem Hunt 67.5 rushing yards. We're going to talk about that tomorrow on the higher or lower segment presented by Underdog Fantasy. But I couldn't get a rushing attempt line on Underdog. And I think the reason being is because he's crushing those numbers right now. But if you can find a good rushing attempt line on another site, I would bet the higher on that just because of how much they're feeding him right now. And I think that's why he makes such a strong trade away candidate. If you're not a contender, if you're a middle of the pack team and you just don't know if you're going to be able to get to the playoffs, Kareem Hunt's going to be the guy the remainder of the season. Carson Steele's just not seemingly featured the way that we maybe hoped that he would be that first week when Pacheco went down and he was the hot waiver wire ad. And again, it's a 29-year-old running back. If you got anything for Kareem Hunt, I'd be ecstatic. But the way he's playing right now, I think you could get a 2nd-round pick. I really do believe someone would give you a 2nd-round pick to push themselves over the top. Because again, not everybody listens and watches the show. Guys in your league are going to go, I got to win this season, and I'm not really thinking about my picks. Go get a 2026 2nd-rounder. 25 second would be great, but go get a 26 second. So if you have Kareem Hunt and you want to ride it out, I get it. I have him in a league where I am a contender. I'm not selling him right now. I'm riding it out. He's killing it, and he's my RB2 with Bijan Robinson. So I'm very excited by that. He was also a guy that was just literally sitting as like the last running back on my bench on that particular roster. And all of a sudden I was like, woof, free player. Let's go. So if you are not contending, I would sell him because he's hot right now, and especially if he has another good week this week, I think it's time to cash in. Another guy that I would trade away, and it seems to be that every week we're talking about Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're not shitting on the Bucs, believe me, we're not. It's kind of the opposite. Rachaad White is my trade away candidate this week. And look, he caught 2 touchdowns on Monday night versus Baltimore. They were chasing the game. You can make every narrative in the world, right? Mike Evans is out until probably at least week 11. Chris Godwin's out for the season. Rachaad White's been bad. He's been bad. And that's the truth of it. And Bucky has been relevant. And I think there's times when you listen to our Friday shows where we talk about sit starts. We said, Rachaad White's not a strong start. If you have to flex him, because we thought Bucky was relevant in certain weeks and has been. So let's break this down, because on paper, it was his best week of the year. And it was, close to almost 30 points in full PPR. But he only had 10 rushing attempts. He turned that into 40 yards. It's about his average right now. He was 6 for 6 in the receiving game. He turned that into 71 yards. It's about his average in targets right now. Bucky had 9 rushing attempts. I just told you White had 10. Pretty even 50-50 split. 6 for 6 for Rachaad White through the air, 3 for 3 for Bucky through the air. Now the Bucs were chasing the game. I get it. So they had to throw. They only ran it a total of 30 times. But 5 of those rushes were by Baker and 5 were from Sean Tucker. So even though it was a phenomenal statistical night for Rachaad White, Bucky's not going away. Sean Tucker's going to get mixed in. Baker could run it a little bit. I do think you can create the narrative, because Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are out, that Rachaad White's going to be the guy and they're going to use him in the passing game and they'll line him up in the slot and Bucky's going to be in the backfield or vice versa. And honestly, that's probably true. The problem is there's no wide receivers for the defense to cover. Jalen McMillan's still a rookie and he has not broken out the way that I don't think we really thought he would, because we knew Evans and Godwin would be the top 2 guys there. But it's really an opportunity now for us to see, is McMillan really that good? Is 31-year-old Sterling Shepard going to have, this last, half of the second half of the season here? Is he going to have a resurgence? These aren't guys that you're, other than McMillan, that you're excited about. So I think you need to look at these next 3 weeks, because I think the Bucs are on a bye in 3 weeks. If I'm right, they are. So they've got Atlanta, Kansas City, and San Francisco. Chris Jones is a game wrecker, and San Francisco, sometimes the defense shows up and they're great, and sometimes they suck. So Atlanta's a divisional game. It was a really high-scoring, super fun game in week 5. I would really take a look at what Rachaad White, I'd put him on the block. I would at least put him on the block and see what offers you get. If you want to hold him this week to see what it looks like, that's great. I understand why you would. But I think in the next 3 weeks, it might be time to sell Rachaad White. Bucky's not going away. This was a player that we thought after last season was maybe also similar to Puka, a little bit of a statistical outlier. And so I do think you can get some good value. I really like the running back class that's coming in next season. If you can go get yourself a couple of picks, if you can quote unquote downgrade at running back plus get a pick back, I am okay with that as well. But I think you can create the narrative and the picture that because of the injury to the wide receiver room, it makes White that much more valuable. And I think there are some people in your leagues that will buy that. So those are my 2 trade away candidates, Rachaad White and Kareem Hunt. Let's talk about 2 guys I think you should be trading for. And I feel like we talk about this guy a ton, but he's never really been our feature on the segment for trade for. But it's T. Higgins. And look, he's had 3 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks, 2, 0, and 1. So 2, 3 weeks ago, no touchdowns. He still went 7 for 7 2 weeks ago. Had a really good week. Touchdown last week. He's had 29 targets over the last 3 weeks. He is averaging exactly 80 yards per week. And here's the narrative around T. Higgins. He could still be traded next season. And he's most likely, if he's going to be traded, going to be a wide receiver 1. There is a team that is going to take him as their wide receiver 1 or their 1B if they happen to have somebody really good. And there's a lot of teams that would be interested in him. The reverse side of that is he could be signed and remain with Burrow. Burrow's under contract. Jamar Chase will get paid. I think the narrative probably still seems like T. Higgins will not be in Cincinnati next year. I think that's what most people believe. But it's possible he remains with Burrow. So my point in saying two sides of this coin isn't to like, well, what's going to happen, make a decision. It's, I do think that it is possible that nothing bad happens, right? Does he go be the wide receiver one? I just saw someone in the chat. Does he go be the wide receiver one in New England? Possibly. It's a team that I was just going to bring up. I would say, does he become the 1B in Dallas? But Jerry's off his rocker. No one knows what Jerry's going to do. If the Rams trade if they trade Cooper Kupp away, and I've said this multiple times in preseason and even this season, I thought T. Higgins was a really good buy for the Rams because the Rams historically don't draft. This is the first time in 7 years they've had a first-round pick. I think it's very realistic that he winds up in Los Angeles. On the same side of that city, does he go and be the wide receiver one for Justin Herbert? Because they clearly need a wide receiver one. McConkey's been fine. He's been great, but Josh Palmer's not the guy long-term. So I think there's a lot of ways that T. Higgins is very relevant next year in another city, and it's obvious that he can be supported by Burrow if he is somehow staying in Cincinnati, even with Jamar Chase there. So a 2025 first could get it done. I just sent out a 25 first for T. Higgins. The guy hasn't responded yet. I'm willing to up that offer a little bit and quote unquote overpay if I need to, but I think that could get it done. Maybe a first and a third, a first and a vet. You know, I think a first and a second is an overpay, probably too much of an overpay. So if you need to get a third back, or you need a third rounder coming back in that trade, or you need to get, you know, a young guy that you're going to go get coming back in that trade as well. But I like T. Higgins the rest of the season. I like T. Higgins long-term in Dynasty. He's a player I've always liked. I do have a lot of exposure to him on a lot of my rosters, best ball, obviously. But I think he's a great trade for candidate right now and a player that you should be targeting regardless of whether you're in contention or not. All right. Let's talk about one more trade for candidate. He was on our league winners show this year in redraft, way back in the preseason, and he has lived up to the hype. He's RB13 on the season. Last week was the first week of the entire year that he has not scored a touchdown. It's Mr. David Montgomery. Go trade for David Montgomery. Look, he's 27 years old. Okay, here comes the age cliff argument. Great. I understand the age cliff. Derrick Henry is 30 years old. He's an anomaly. David Montgomery is not Derrick Henry, but he's got 2 more years where he just signed an extension worth $18.25 million, of which $10.5 million is guaranteed. The Lions love him. It's Sonic and Knuckles there in Detroit. Gibbs is on a rookie deal. J-Mo is on a rookie deal. They've already paid Amon-Ra. This was a brilliant move by the Lions. This is a team that is, I believe, the best team in the NFL right now. Certainly the best team in the NFC. If you want to put the Ravens in that conversation, fine. I'm sorry. I have the Ravens over the Chiefs right now. The Chiefs are the worst undefeated team in the league. I said at the top of the show. I'll say it again. But look, David Montgomery is RB13 on the season. And the only downside of David Montgomery truly is that Gibbs isn't there. Or sorry, that Gibbs is there. That's the only downside. And they can coexist. You've seen it. They coexist very well. And so to me, I would be willing to trade a 25 or even a 26 first for Monty. I think that gets it done straight up. I think a 26 first and second, if you want to quote unquote overpay on that, a 26 first and a 25 second, if you want to push that first out an extra year, I think that could get it done. I think Chuba and a 25 second could be a good starting point. I don't think that deal would get done because Chuba is a rental. Jonathan Brooks's 21-day window has been activated, but he's practicing, but like there's no indication that he's going to play. So Chuba is still relevant for this season. But I think Chuba in a 25 second is an interesting starting point for our conversation. And then I had this player a couple weeks ago as a trade away target, and I still think there's a name value associated with him. I think Michael Pittman in a second, getting a third back for Monty, might get done straight up, but also is a good negotiating point. Anthony Richardson's been awful. The pass volume is low. Pittman scored the touchdown with Joe Flacco under center, but I think the name volume is, or excuse me, the name appeal is there and the volume just isn't. So getting Pittman off your roster to upgrade a running back position with a pick into Monty, I think is fantastic. I do have a comp, and I just saw it actually. It was, I can't believe I saw this trade. This, I'll be honest, this really irritated me because I wasn't trading for Monty in this league. I'm in a massive rebuild in this league, and so I'm just not targeting Monty, even though I think he's great. I just saw Isaiah Likely in a 2025 second go through and Monty on the other side. If I'm the Montgomery owner and you send me that, that is a smash accept. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Mark Andrews in the last 2 weeks has been good. He's been good. And he was awful the first part of the season, like non-existent, zero worth awful. So I don't think that gets done, but I bring that trade up for two reasons. One, to give you a comp of a real life trade. Two, you just don't know, as we talked about at the top of the show, you just don't know how people value, what they value in your league and how they value players and picks. So to me, a Likely in a second seems like terrible value. If I'm the Montgomery owner, it kind of feels like I'm giving him away. But again, you don't know what people value. So start with some trades that, you think are good and you would accept, and go from there. And obviously, as we always talk about, don't start with your best offer. So wanted to just kind of see, taking a quick peek in the chat. Don't see a ton of questions tonight. Normally get a lot more sit start questions. It's a shorter show. No guests tonight. Everybody was busy. Not a problem. Haven't done a solo cast in a while. So really quickly, of course, then let's just kind of wrap the show here. Y'all know what's coming up tomorrow. I will be back at 4 p.m. Pacific time to go through my DFS higher or lower presented by Underdog. Of course, my DFS weekly cash lineups, my weekly picks, all of the betting lines that I like will be included in tomorrow's show. That's at 4 o'clock. And then please join us on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern and then at 8 o'clock Pacific time as well, as we go through our sit start part 1 with Classic Mike and Kendall. And then, of course, what I think is the more entertaining, no, I'm kidding, but with me and Rasta coming back at 8 o'clock. And then on Sunday Live, you can always catch Classic Mike as he takes you right up to kickoff with all of those sit starts, inactives, and actives, making sure that you are 100% prepared to win the week in week 8 as we make the turn for the back half of the fantasy football season. Thanks for joining another episode of The Extra Point. If you are not liked and subscribed, please make sure you jump onto youtube.com/The Extra Point FFB. Hit that like and subscribe button. If the weekly show, you cannot always tune in live, no problem. You're more of a podcast person, jump on over to Spotify and Patreon. You can always catch my content and listen along on those two sites as well. Enjoy the week. For those that aren't going to be here the rest of the week, hope you have a great Sunday football, win your weekly matchup in your league, I should say. For those that are coming back, look forward to seeing you tomorrow for the DFS and betting show. And then, of course, looking forward to seeing everybody on Friday as we go through all of the start sits for the week. Have a good night. We out.
Wanted to write fantasy is the play. Marking nothing, but I tune in every Friday. Strategies provided, I will lock in every way. So go and roll your sleeves.